Hey there, I'm Anthony Edmonds. I'm the Green Party candidate for Waverley follower of the Beaver Bank, and I'm happy to be here today talking to Lyle Mailman.
Yes, and I'm Lyle. I am the Lyle Mailman, the creator of the Beaver Bank Community Watch. I'm one of the administrators with Robert and Lena. And the Community Watch is kind of created to create awareness in our community, what's available, what's around. And so with this upcoming election, we figured it was important to get to know the candidates that are running to represent our residents. So, you tell us a little bit about yourself, Anthony.
All right, sure. So I guess I'm probably a little bit young, like people will probably notice to be in politics, but not quite so young as I look. I'm 30 years old, so I've had about a decade of experience in my career in engineering, which is what I do on my day job. So I work in aerospace out by the airport. I work on the Cormorant search and rescue helicopters. So it's lots of fun, yeah, and I've got some side projects on the go. I'm also doing some consulting, not so much the last couple of weeks, been busy, but I've been doing consulting with a startup in Dartmouth that's working on some technology for sustainable onshore aquaculture, which is also really neat. So my professional experience is sort of this mosaic, which is, I like variety, and I think it also gives me a good variety of experience understanding sort of what some of the issues are that affect the province and day-to-day things that are important in our community.
Awesome. What you say about running for politics? There's usually that one thing that gives you the decision to say that, I'm going to put my name in, I'm going to represent. What would you say that one sort of inspiration or decision making piece? What's the thing that says,
I know what you mean, yeah.
I'm going to do that, or say,
it's a big leap.
Yes.
Yeah, and every politician's got like this origin story. Like, well, I woke up one morning and I looked in the mirror and I realized that I had to. And I guess I'm no different because for me it was, I guess it sort of comes back to my own family and personal situation. So I'm happily married, live with my wife Jillian, and she's doing a doctorate at Dalhousie, which is fantastic. She's in the home stretch of that right now, coming into the end of it, which is great. And then she's got a whole career ahead of her. But each of us being 30 years old and her career getting settled, my career being settled, we're looking at things going, we're probably going to settle down and have kids soon, right? And then I look at sort of the world around us, and it's like things are by and large pretty good for Canadians, right? But you have to wonder, like, is that still going to be the case in 50 years or something like that? Like, what's the world going to be like for my future children? And I think, well, it kind of depends. It could be pretty good, right? Also, it might not be so good, depending on a variety of different things. And I mean, everybody knows what the big issues are, but a lot of them are things that look like they're getting worse right now. And I think, to me, it feels like it would be almost a little bit irresponsible to bring children into the world if I'm not at least doing a little bit to try to right the ship and steer us in the right direction so that they can have lives that are like at least as good as mine, but hopefully, better, right? So for me, that's what it's really about. It's about future generations. It's about, not even 50 years from now, but 10, 20 years from now, yes. And what that's going to look like. And is our healthcare system still going to be functional in 20 years? Are we going to have, what's the climate going to look like? And then probably the biggest thing for me is, how engaged are people going to be with our democracy? Because I see that as being sort of what underlies all of these things, that by and large, you ask any person on the street what needs to be done about this, that, or the other problem, and everybody kind of has a pretty good, rough, similar idea of what the answers are. The problem seems to be sort of getting everyone on the same page about actually doing the things, right? And I think we're struggling with that because we've got a system that's just sort of dysfunctional and broken, and I see some obvious ways that it can be improved, and above all, see that, it's not going to happen without work. There's no silver bullet. There's no easy answer to make our government more functional. It's going to take a lot of elbow grease and blood, sweat, and tears. And I'm willing to put that in if it means that my kids can grow up and cast a vote and know that that they're going to be represented and that their needs are going to be addressed by their government. And to me, that's what I want.
One of the things from the previous forum with the Laker was kind of impressive was kind of from your answers what you've had and just getting to know you a little bit better as you've ran in several elections so far. I'm like, it's great to get to know Anthony because he's here, he wants to be a part of the community, do things. Was kind of your scientific or your researching approach to some of the questions or some of the bigger issues for the riding, Beaver Bank coming together as one and being with Fall River, Waverley, and there's some pretty big questions to answer and look at, but you really take an approach to it, like when there's reports, where there's things, it's pretty admirable to see you going through the fine paperwork and the details to do some
I try to do that, yeah.
fact finding and really get a big knowledge.
You flatter me, Lyle. So I'm of the philosophy that that knowledge is power, and that we can't make good decisions without being well informed. So to me, the primary thing on any issue is not to have the right answer or to be on the say the popular thing, but the first thing is to know everything that's going on, to understand the situation, and read those bland, boring reports. People don't like to do that, but it's like, you got to do it. And I think, to harken back to what I said, introducing myself, I think some of that drive maybe comes from my career or my professional experience, because as an engineer, you don't make a decision without having all of the information available to you. That would be irresponsible otherwise, right? As an engineer. And so, I always try to get all the information before coming down on one side or another of an issue. And I think it's not just something that's worthwhile to do, but it's also it helps to deal with the sort of eventualities. If issues are complicated, right? And you can be pro thing or anti thing, whatever it is.
There's fact finding and making.
But there's nuance.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
It's
and
not
something unexpected.
And having a black and white world is compared to
exactly.
There's these so many shades of gray. Right? There's lots of colors too.
That's what it is.
It's finding possibilities.
Yeah.
So let's get into the Beaver Bank issues, because this is certainly what we want to focus on.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'll get into the first question. That Beaver Bank has had the Murchison Drive connector, Beaver Bank bypass, long promised, and then removed from provincial plans. Having one way in or one way out has been a safety concern. We've seen Murchison be built from the 101 to Middle Sackville, the Aerotech connector from the 102 to Wellington being constructed, with no plans to extend to the Beaver Bank Road. These connections would allow Hants County traffic and trucks from the 3 quarry operations be routed to a collector road and 102. This would allow for speed adjustments to permit more crosswalks, create a transit loop so students could get to Lockview, and a second exit entrance to Beaver Bank. What are your thoughts on what can be done and what it could do for community connections?
So this is something that came up in the Laker forum as well, and I stand by what I said there. That to me, I don't see any technical reason that the Murchison Drive connector couldn't proceed. It seems like a reasonable project, and it seems like that would address a lot of the traffic and bottleneck. Certainly, from Wingate out, there's still obviously a tremendous traffic issue, and I wouldn't help with that very much, or potentially at all. But from there up to Sackville Drive, that really is a serious traffic issue. That's a serious safety issue, and that's even more bottleneck because it's also there's traffic being contributed there from Millwood subdivision, from Stokehill Drive, which is a huge subdivision, and Glendale, and all that's competing for access to this narrow, one little bottleneck strip of roadway, and man, is that ever back up. I think the emergency drive connector would help with that a lot, because it would allow residents of Beaver Bank and to a lesser extent Windsor Junction to sort of bypass a lot of that, and I think it would do it in a way that doesn't cause a lot of other complications or issues. So to me, the issue there seems to be one of funding. And now, I don't have this on very good authority, but from what I gathered, it seems like the municipality is still on board with that plan. It seems to be that transportation infrastructure renewal, and by extension the province, the government, hasn't really made it a funding priority. I think our incoming MLA, obviously is going to have limited power in terms of what they can do to force the Minister of Transportation, unless that person becomes the Minister of Transportation, to actually make that funding decision. But I'd be willing to go toe-to-toe on that and fight that fight. And I think I like to think, hopefully, I might be well equipped to arrange the proper sorts of meetings and talk to the right people with my professional experience. And I don't do that type of engineering, civil engineering. I'm a mechanical engineer, but I think I can speak the same language to a great extent, and I hopefully would be able to make some inroads there in demonstrating why that should be a priority. In the grand scheme of things, it's not that many kilometers of roadway. So although there's land of requisition and I think some of the environmental assessments might need to be redone because they're tremendously old, but that's probably not a huge issue. There's going to be a not a significant cost associated with that, but I don't think it's going to be huge. And given how much it would mean to the community here, I'd like to see it made a priority. So I'd really be pushing for that.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we'll get into Woodbine. Woodbine is now our district's largest and most dense neighborhood of affordable housing. There have been long-standing concerns by its residents. Water meters were mandated to be installed on homes in Woodbine. Water quality issues, terrible discoloration, are happening now. Now the water source coming into the park from Halifax Water is clear. There was a letter from the park owners that there was a spike in water pressure that caused some bursting of pipes within the park. So that's happening now. There's no crosswalks that are permitted at the Blind Crest in the corners where the bus stops are for safe crossing, view planes and such. There's a lack of public recreation facilities, programs, and parks for youth. And there's no operating homeowners association to represent homeowners with broad and individual issues, as well as like a education component, so people know if park management that has been inconsistent in its requirements for homeowners. What would you do to help support and represent residents of Woodbine?
What a doozy of a question, right?
It's over seven years of having people share their stories and things, and it's it's a question that hasn't been asked before because it's now it's our largest and most dense.
Half a dozen questions that all need to be
Yes.
asked. So let's get through them one at a time, I guess. So start off with the water issues. It's my belief and Green Party policy, essentially, that access to not just technically like legally drinkable, but quality and water you would want to drink is a human right, just straight up, because it's something you need for your survival. And I think that's something that's not really recognized by the way that the province relates to its citizens. By and large, in that case, we're talking about municipally managed water through Halifax Water. So in this case, the province is really downloading responsibility to the municipalities, which is within their rights to do. But then, of course, we've also got outside of Woodbine, not to change the subject, people who are on wells who have had lots of issues. There's people on the Grand Lake watershed that have been concerned about the algae and all that. And that's something that municipalities aren't responsible for at all. It's Green Party policy we'd like to see for those people on wells to have access to testing to make sure that the water is drinkable. That's the sort of service that I could see being extended to people on municipal water as well. Now, I mean, again, this is largely the responsibility of Halifax Water and thereby technically a municipal issue, but I don't think it's an area where the province can afford to waive its responsibility. If Halifax Water isn't providing water that's of adequately high quality, maybe the province needs to do something about that. They need to be holding municipalities accountable. That is part of the responsibility of the province.
And there's that extra layer of responsibility on the land lease property as well.
Mm-hmm. That's true. Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah, so it's not a simple issue. I mean, I'm probably jumping ahead here, but it's almost reminiscent of the problems with the rail crossing at the Beaver Bank station, where every level of government sort of points fingers at each other and goes, well, it's, I don't want to.
There's the utility, and this is some of the things that what can change within how the Nova Scotia Utility Review Board makes decisions. It's educating homeowners on the rights within not the Department of Housing, but
like the
Tenancy Board. Thank you very much. Yeah, you start bouncing a couple things, and I'm like,
yeah,
my brain has to pick which department it is because
there's
so many phone calls, and that's what just making the calls, and then how do you get to share that information, right?
Yeah. Well, and I mean, a large part of that is that helping people navigate that is part of an MLA's job. Maybe not like nominally, but in practice, very much as part of an MLA's job to stick handle those things, to help people get in touch with the right people about issues like that. And that's definitely something that I'm prepared to do. Definitely. I mean, like I said, I have a full-time job, aerospace engineering, and then I'm doing this part-time consulting work. If I'm elected, all that ends, and I'm going to spend the same amount of time, if not more, that I was spending at those two jobs doing this one, because I think it's a worthwhile endeavor.
So yeah, I guess that it comes down to what would you do to help support and represent residents of Woodbine. It's
constituency work, yeah. But we shouldn't skip over the rest of that list. Those are really good things.
Yeah.
What was the next thing after water?
There was there's the crosswalk limitation to get to the bus stops.
Oh, that.
The lack of public recreations and
Can I share an
facilities.
anecdote with you about the crosswalk?
Yep.
So when I was campaigning for the federal election it was early in this point, so I think it was September 2019. So about this time of year, I was in that area going door to door meeting people with one of my volunteers, a really nice man from Lower Sackville. And we were walking down the shoulder between Woodbine and Belkin. And I think it was about there anyway. And bus stops, a couple people get off. They're crossing the street, of course, because most people live on the other side of the street. This was Sackville Bound. And the second person to get off the bus was an older lady who was didn't seem to be very, very sporadic. She was moving a little slow. And they get off the bus leaves, going across the road. Traffic stopped to let them cross, as people are inclined to do a kind of start because there's no crosswalk there. But of course, there's no crosswalk, and so it's a nerve-wracking situation because, So this woman's in a little bit of a hurry, so she's trying to jog a little bit, which maybe wasn't a good idea because she wasn't, I don't think, quite, capable of doing it effectively.
It's a scary situation there on the road for people that need to get back and forth.
It became very harrowing because she tripped and fell.
Yeah.
And landed and didn't catch herself very well. She landed with a good deal of her weight on her face and scraped up her face. So she's all covered in blood, and from the fall, you know, she was pretty bruised up. Like she couldn't get up. She was
hurt.
Yeah. So anyway, my buddy John and I, we ran over and, you know, made sure the traffic was stopped and called 911 and stayed with her until the paramedics arrived. But you know, she was not doing well. Like so I think, I guess I'm getting names or anything, so it's not too much privacy. But she suffered from diabetes, and I think her blood sugar was low. And that's
combination of things
that's why she was moving a little slow. And
you had an extra layer of stress and trying to go through traffic and things.
Exactly,
right?
and this is it. And I mean, I don't really know, but I feel like if there was a crosswalk there, that wouldn't have happened. And she was injured pretty bad. Like she was not doing good. So like, it's a necessity. Like it's the kind of thing that. Anyway, so I gather, I don't, you know, all the nitty-gritty of this, but I gather the issue is that it's, again, that levels of government thing. It's, you know, it's the province is responsible for this stretch of road, the municipality for that stretch of road, and it's the county who would normally put in the crosswalks. They don't do it because
it's a lot of things that Beaver Bank, and as I've tried to communicate or create an awareness piece, a lot of people, you know, I'll say, well, make the phone call. Let's see what is said.
Yeah, what reasons they give.
What do we hear back, and see how much bouncing back between departments there is. So, yeah, hopefully with this election and some information communication coming together, we can do some focus things.
Yeah, well, so I know, like Lisa Blackburn,
yes,
in my esteem, is a pretty good counselor. I've really, you know, liked what I've seen from her. She seems really motivated. She's really keen. She's really good. I would love to work with her on something like that, because if it's a question of the two levels of government can't figure out who's allowed to give permission to do, or who's going to pay for what, or anything like that, I'm sure we can work together on it because it needs to be done, right? Like it's a safety thing. And I know this is actually an issue that I've heard complaints from a few different councillors that. And it's a relic of amalgamation, when all the various townships and counties in Halifax County and everything amalgamated. They had a deal with the province that's written into the HRM charter, I think, that the municipality, the amalgamated municipality took over responsibility for all the roads that all the constituent ones were responsible for. But then there's, of course, a bunch of roads that are provincial responsibility.
And then when you get to Beaver Bank, to the community center, the provincial department takes over for the road clearing for the rest up to North Beaver Bank, and then you have Sandy Lake and things that have generated. It's these other things that have gone stretched out. That
yep, and it's because the way that's written into the charter, the ones that the municipality is responsible for are all grandfathered in. But then they're also supposed to take over responsibility for certain provincial roads once they hit a certain population density or density of units, of residential units. And that winds up being a patchwork too. So I know there's been a lot of talk from a few different councillors about rationalizing that system and making it make more sense. But from what I understand, it's not something that the province is keen to do or has made a priority. And I think largely it comes down to cost. That the province is worried about not being able to download as much of the costs of municipalities as they previously were able to do, which is a valid concern because provincial coffers are already strained with healthcare and everything else. However, if we can, and maybe this is naively optimistic, but if we can negotiate an agreement that is financially equitable for both sides, but make it make more sense on a map, and maybe it could result in cost savings. I know we've got plows that go halfway down a road and then U-turn and leave, and then the county plow or province one, either or depending, has to come and do the rest of it. It just doesn't make any sense, right? We can do that.
Yep, let's get into another question. The province issues a list of schools getting work done to them. There's 2 schools in Beaver Bank that are in desperate need of repairs, but yet they're not on the list. What would you do to ensure the schools in Beaver Bank get repaired?
again, that's one of those things that comes down to doing constituents or getting in contact with the right people. I know, so my sister has worked at Beaver Kinsack, and just before the start of summer break, they had an issue where, I think it was actually going on for a while, they had an issue where, supposedly because of COVID, but I mean, that's caused all sorts of scheduling problems, who knows what really the issue was, that they hadn't been able to get the tap water at the school to meet the tests, to be considered drinking water.
Monarch Elementary is just getting word that water connection is happening after it's been installed since 1996.
Yeah. So the upshot is they had bottled water being delivered for the staff students to drink because they couldn't, be sure that the tap water was drinkable. But again, because of COVID, the scheduled delivery was postponed, and they ran out of bottled water, and the principal had to run to the supermarket and buy a bunch of bottles of water. Like, this is the sort of thing where, and this, I'm going to harken back to one of the themes that I was really trying to hit in the Laker Forum. It's this not planning far enough ahead and then waiting until it becomes a bigger problem to deal with it. It's the putting out fires mentality.
Yes.
And it's like, yeah, we're strapped for resources. We're a have-not province. There isn't money for everything. I get that. But if that means putting things off until they become even more expensive and more of a hassle and bigger issues.
Monarch Elementary, the roof is deteriorated, and so the grit from the shingles have run into the rain gutters, which has clogged the rain gutters with this much shingle grit, which now plugs the rain gutters, puts that much water. There's grass growing in it now, and then the water goes into the building.
Yeah, you don't
and
mess
grows
around
the
with
building.
drainage.
There's some things there and there's a pigeon colony that was closed up, but what remediation or air quality of things is there as well.
That's again, it's snowballing, right?
Yes.
You don't have to be an engineer to know, and I know because I'm an engineer. You don't have to be an engineer to know. You do not mess around with drainage problems.
And
if you have a drainage problem, you got to get on that.
And a deferred budget of maintenance is a scary thing if that gets too big.
Yeah.
And how do you manage and go through those? So Beaver Bank has had a significant loss of services. The bus route was shortened to half the community, and the closing of its largest employer at Ivy Meadows, the closing of the community office hub. The MLA office has always been in Fall River, Waverley. Would you commit to having your MLA office in Beaver Bank to provide a needed community resource for residents?
So first off, I think it's not a coincidence that you mentioned the bus route changes and Ivy Meadows together, because it's my understanding that Ivy Meadows...
It's one of the contributing issues, as they've said.
Yeah.
That facility was there because of a Cold War missile defense system built by the Americans that the Canadians took over, and that kind of dissipated to new technologies. And so yes, Ivy Meadows is kind of up there from a community that once was.
Yeah. I mean, it is an important living in the community. But I think whether or not the transit problem is sort of the straw that broke the camel's back on Ivy Meadows, we need to turn that around. And I'm saying this in full recognition that that's not something an MLA can directly do. That is the municipality. The municipality makes those decisions. However, I'd like to see, and I'm going to sound real green here, I'd like to see provincial funding for transit so that transit can be accessible in, areas further outside of the large cities in the province. Because access to transit has huge economic spin-off. It's very important for people who are say retired on a fixed income, or students, or young people who can't afford a car, or that's not practical for them for whatever reason. it's just kind of a necessity of life to get around, and it's to look at it from this nickels and dimes, business perspective that, well, this route won't pay for itself from fares, to me is kind of silly. In my view, in the Green Party's view, we should get rid of transit fares anyway. We should recognize that, that we all benefit from having good transit, because, hey, if you want to have a place like Ivy Meadows, you need to be able to get people there. Why are we charging people for that? We want people there, right? We want people to be able to get around in the city, in the municipality, because it makes it a better place to live.
Yeah, and
we should be making that happen.
And Beaver Bank, we're kind of on this fringe where it was kind of another one where we live in Beaver Bank, we shop in Sackville, we commute through Sackville, and trying to get those community connections. What could be done to improve those with the rest of the riding, but as well, like having a constituency office in Beaver Bank, we've been limited in development to have like another doctor's office, or there was a proposed drugstore, professional kind of strip where you could have like an MLA office or things like that, and the only empty space would be like Tucker Lake Pizza beside there. It's missing like a physiotherapist office or another doctor's office.
Yeah. Because this has come up, and I've been racking my brain trying to think of where there are
where you could have it, because you'd have to have it accessible as well.
And that's a challenge as well. And I'm not sure. I do know. When Percy Harris was the MLA, he had his constituency office.
It was next to B&R Pet Supply.
On Windsor Junction Road. So I actually rented that space for my campaign office in 2019, the federal election. And to be honest, I probably would have tried to again for this election, except because of the pandemic, it was like, well, nobody would be there, so
it's hard. Yes.
Waste of money. But I do have a good relationship with the landlord there, so that would be one potential, and I believe it is accessible. So that's fairly central. It's not in Beaver Bank, but it's really, really close, and I think also accessible to the other further flung parts of the district. Strictly speaking, this district includes a bit of Enfield.
Yes.
So.
The residents in Beaver Bank have had a couple issues that have gone before the Nova Scotia Utility and Review Board that have caused great concern. The infamous Wingate Beaver Bank Road intersection. The last train was 12 years ago on the Windsor line, and the intersection is yet to be upgraded. The Nova Scotia Utility and Review Board found the volunteer United Rails to Trails group wasn't the appropriate body to challenge the defunct Windsor Hands Rail Company and Bob Schmidt. You found that the Nova Scotia Department of Transportation infrastructure renewal would be the appropriate body to challenge. Now, what would you do if elected?
I think much like the Marston Drive connector, this is one of those cases where you'd have to, or I would, as the MLA, get in touch with the people in transportation infrastructure renewal who would need to be the ones who would nominally do that. See what I can do to facilitate that, because I find often with stuff like this, it's a bit of like lead a horse to water. That probably if they're not doing it, it's probably because whichever functionary or civil servant would need to be the person to actually file paperwork doesn't feel like he or she has time to file that paperwork.
Yes.
And so,
with that intersection, like it was supposed to be a done upgrade, but then the access to that right-of-way became very legally complicated.
Yeah.
With the intercolonial railway. There's with CN and the Railway and the Transportation Act, there's a federal Department of Transportation, and it's something that it would be great to have use. Beaver Bank is the largest ATV club in the province, 5,000 members.
I've gone.
There's that trail. There's that trail and transportation component where if someone could go to Windsor for lunch, or people from other places would come like to the Beaver Bank Station for lunch along that lines. Another thing that having a connection with Second Lake Park and that trailway, active transportation, multi-use,
shared trail on this stuff because and this is again one of those areas like transit and like drinking water where I think the province has been too content to rest on their laurels and say, well, that's the municipality responsibility, we don't care, because there's no doubt the province has more resources, especially capital resources for doing things like making improvements than the municipality does. And to me, as a Green, looking at this sort of stuff, again, it's not just important to the people who are directly going to use it. It's the sort of thing that actually benefits the broader community and the province as a whole. It has economic spin-off and so on and so forth. And especially for something like a multi-use trail, it's like every person that bikes on that trail, if somebody's using that trail and they're getting to their workplace, that's one less car commuting on the road and less traffic. If somebody's doing it and they're staying in shape, that's maybe one less person who's going to develop a chronic illness that's associated with them not being able to get enough exercise in some other way. It's going to save healthcare money, and just so on and so forth.
There's there's the quality of life component too, where Beaver Bank doesn't have a beach. We have a couple there, Lake Tucker Lake, just kind of a shoulder of the road thing, no parking signs. That kind of, we don't have a park to go to where you see Fall River with the Windsor Junction Community Center, something like that would be lovely. In Beaver Bank, a picnic park or a provincial park or anything along that lines, but at least having some connection with Second Lake or something that could be created, right?
I mean, I know. Obviously, this isn't the sort of thing you can promise because it sort of depends on how
there's
but
so
I would
many.
love to see more provincial parks. I think provincial parks are amazing, and as the area develops more and densifies, I think it's important to have park space set aside so that
reserve lands from development.
Exactly, so that there will always be some green space where people can go and enjoy that. And again, it's important for tourism, it's important for health, it's important for quality of life. It's just making a nice place to live so people want to live here.
Right? A community connection sort of thing too, for a place to gather and for families to enjoy.
Yeah, and for programs, recreation, sport, that sort of stuff. I know that was one of the questions about Woodbine, and that's again one of those areas where it's largely municipal responsibility, but I think the province could contribute to it. I know there's an initiative underway right now at the municipality level to sort of rationalize how sports and rec programs are subsidized, because most HRM sports and rec programs are heavily subsidized, but they're mostly, again, sort of a patchwork that descended from pre-amalgamation.
Yes.
And they want to rationalize them and sort of spread the subsidies around, because there are certain communities that aren't really seeing as much of that subsidy, and they're not getting their money's worth of their property taxes. And around here, that tends to be the case. It's more in the former townships, in Bedford, in Dartmouth, in Halifax, that they're actually...
We have a concentration of population, so...
And they had all these rec programs, 30 years ago that they still have now, and they're still subsidized now because they're
It was written in.
And it made sense then because they were dense areas. But I mean, this area has grown in the last 30 years quite a bit, right, compared to downtown Halifax, which has been relatively stagnant because, there's not much more room to build and there's not much densification happening. So there should be more rec programs here. Hopefully with that rationalization, a bit of a lot will happen. But I'd also like to see the province contribute some funding to that directly through the municipalities. Like maybe make a pool of money accessible that municipalities can use to subsidize sports and rec programs for youth and stuff, just so that the fees to participate are lower. Because I know what I've seen, and I don't like to be too critical, but it's a pattern that I've seen in some of the other parties, the Liberals and the Progressive Conservatives especially, where their approach to this tends to be to throw a tax credit at it. Because they'll say, well, here's what we'll do, and I think this is in the Progressive Conservative platform this time around, is we'll have a tax credit of $500,000 or something like that, where if you put your kids into sports programs, you have to pay fees. Well, then you can put the receipts in your tax return and then you get a partial tax credit back. And it's like, well, that's cool and all, but that doesn't help people who aren't paying much income tax because it's a tax credit. If you're a student, if you're, low income, doesn't do anything for you, so it's regressive, which is, it's not helping the people it needs to help most. And then on top of that, if the barrier to entry is the fee, if you can't pay $200 or $300 for, this season's ice time or whatever, you're not going to say to yourself, oh, well, that's okay because I'll get 30% of it back in 8 months when I file my taxes. No, you need that money now. So instead of throwing money at people's tax returns, we should just be giving it to municipalities directly to lower the fees so that people can just participate, right?
That's excellent.
To me, it seems pretty obvious.
So we're getting around our half-hour mark. One more question.
Okay.
And also, anybody can reach out to you for any further discussions.
Okay.
Monarch subdivision residents pay thousands of dollars for municipal water out of their own pocket without any funding from federal or provincial government, while other communities are receiving substantial government support. What would you do as an MLA to see if there's anything the province could do now to lessen that burden for residents?
And this comes back to the same as the case with Woodbine, where the province is sort of showing itself responsibility for good quality drinking water there. I think the province needs to recognize that it's part of its mandate to make sure that people have access to drinking water. And if that means ponying up some funding, they should probably be doing that. Now, one thing that the province, to me, that's like a no-brainer that the province should be doing for this sort of thing.
And the new project that we get a large influx of federal and things like that as
Yeah.
well, right?
And of course, the issue there too is often to get federal funding for stuff like that, the province needs to put in funding, and
Yes.
so that becomes an issue as well. Again, it's the layers of government, right? But one thing that I'd like to see in, as soon as possible implemented is a lot of these are done through local improvement charges, right? And we've seen this recently with the water going in on Forward Road, where a lot of people were slamming this local improvement charge that some of them weren't expecting because they don't even have access to the water.
Yes.
The amount's really high, and then so what do you do? You get a payment plan. And I imagine, people on Monarch Drive are having the same dilemma where they go, I don't have thousands of dollars
they're financing
right now.
through private, yes.
And
through
you're
a
paying
bank.
5% interest or something.
Yes.
When interest rates right now are rock bottom low. So here's the thing, to me, this is a no-brainer. The province has relatively easy access to capital at really low interest rates right now. They can issue 5-10-year bonds with close to like bank prime interest rates, which are a third of what these people are paying local improvement charges. So why not then? And now another thing, again, layers of government. The municipality doesn't have access to this kind of credit. Legally, from their charter, they're not allowed to take on debt like that. But the province can. So what the province, I think, should be doing is making a pool of capital available where they say, like, look, we'll issue bonds, we'll provide the money up front for these local improvement charges, and then the municipality can pay us back over time at a much lower interest rate, and then the county could pass that on to the residents. So instead of paying 4.5%, you might be paying like 1.5 or 2%.
Yeah, it's the...
and that would cost almost nothing for the province.
It's kind of the banking, the business of banking sort of thing as well, but doing a government funded option. And I don't know if it would be liens against properties that would be guaranteed payment or these kinds of...
Well, I think
there's lots of
maybe just still do it as a local improvement charge,
Yes.
and then get the municipality, basically enable the municipality to offer the exact same local improvement charge program they do now, but with lower interest rates by giving them access to this capital. And then it would, again, it would be a tax lien against property, same as, like, it would all work the same as now, just a lower interest rate. And I don't see any obstacle to that. I believe the province can do that.
All right, so let's, in about 2 minutes, if there's anything else you'd like to add, and we'll wrap up for today. So if there's anything else you'd like to say.
So many things. I guess, well, a theme I've really been trying to get across to people in this election that I really feel strongly about is probably the thing I've heard most on doorsteps as a reason for why people aren't voting for me. And lots of people tell me that they are, actually, which is great. But I've talked to people who said, well, I like what you're saying. I think you'd make a good MLA. I believe in your values. I believe in what you want to do, your priorities. I want to vote for you, but I'm worried, I'm concerned that I might go and vote for you, and then you're going to come out third place or fourth place or something, and I'm going to feel like I wasted my vote. I'll tell you, from the number of people that have said that to me, I'm very confident if everyone who was feeling that just actually just voted for me, it wouldn't be a waste. We would see a tremendous increase in green support, and whether or not that meant me getting elected, I think is secondary to the message that it would send to the other candidates in this district, but to the other political parties generally in the province, that they need to be thinking a little bit differently. Because I know from the Laker Forum and from other things, when I've talked to the other candidates, and I've talked a lot to Brian and Marnie and Christina, and we see eye to eye on a lot of things, and I respect a lot of the passion that they have, but they also see that many of the things that I'm saying about how we could approach things differently, have a better philosophy.
There's some of the party politics that have, you have the three parties
really
kind of
right?
related to the system.
Yeah.
And look at a rise in independent politics at the
Yeah.
federal level, or
Exactly.
different things like that.
And we could use more of that here.
And it would create opportunity for better discussion when it came to a minority government or a majority government, or any sort of thing that could help our system.
And so I think a vote for me, whether or not you think that I have a chance of winning, set that aside. A vote for me is a vote for that attitude. And the other parties, they're not asleep at the wheel on these things. They might not listen to all people's concerns about the important issues, but they pay a lot of attention to the the changing winds of electoral politics. And if they see this Green candidate is talking about being nonpartisan and not bickering and cooperating, and all of a sudden, wow, they're getting lots of votes, they're going to listen to that.
Yeah.
I know in the 2019 federal election, there were at least half a dozen, I think it was about 8, debates and forums and things. And I approached that with very much the same attitude that, we need to stop pretending like this is a team sport and we're fighting each other here. We're all on the same team. We have the same goals. We just need to figure out the best way of doing it. I always approach things that way, when I'm interacting with the other candidates, and I try to be positive. I try to speak to their strengths as well as their weaknesses. I don't want to bash them, right? I want whoever gets elected, I want them to do a good job.
Creates opportunity for conversation
and
working together.
After, half a dozen forums like that, all of a sudden I'm hearing the Liberal candidate, I'm hearing the Conservative candidate using the same language and saying the same things and complimenting each other and saying, hey, you know what, actually, now that you mention it, that particular item in your platform, I like the way you guys are approaching that. If you form government and I'm in opposition, I won't speak against that. I'll support that because that actually is a good idea. And that's what we need to hear. And there are tons of ways to get us there besides who we elect. It's the message you send with your vote.
So, I'd like to thank you, Anthony. I appreciate you. It's an excellent chance to meet and talk and chat.
It's been fun.
And so the election is August 17th. Our early poll, at the Brown Hall is open. There's also a vote from home option before the election. The returning officers hire people that will bring the ballot box to you. So you need to call and set up that appointment before election day. And you can have people come right to your house as well, making it perfectly safe. Big thank you to the Beaver Kinsack Lions Club for letting us use the facilities here today. It's been muchly appreciated. And again, I'd like to say thank you very much, Anthony.
Thank you. It's been really great. I'm glad that you're doing this. It's fantastic.